What I thought would be interesting to do was, now that we are kind of affixed in 6 railroads in the U.S. and Canada and Mexico. First one alphabetically is the Burlington Northern Santa Fe. So we're going to look at that, and we're going to look in a little bit more detail at the components that were there in 1950. The Chicago Burlington and Quincy. And here's Craig's favorite, the GP30.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be the GP22, but right at that time, the General Electric came out with the U25B, which is 2,500 horsepower. This was only 2,250 horsepower. So the General Motors salesman said, well, we're going to call it GP30 because it has 30 improvements. So and so it got very confusing, but they call this the Skyline casing. This was the one of a kind. I mean, they sold 1,000 of them, and actually quite a few of them are still running around.
Still running. Right.
They've been rebuilt. The Burlington Northern, I think, has about 30 or 40 of them that have been rebuilt, but they're still running around after, well, let's see, they came out in 62, so that would make them 60 years old.
60.
Wow.
If they had made an SD30, it would have looked pretty good. The proportions would have been pretty nice.
Yeah, much better. So here's the back end.
Those trucks look terrible.
That's the standard.
That's the plain Blomberg truck.
Yeah, it was a design the guy came up with for the FT, and it's hollow, right in the middle. It's a hollow casting, and then it blows air into the traction motors, and it has so it's spring here, and then it goes over here, and then there's a bolster in the middle.
Yeah.
That the engine actually sits on, and then they put these side spring hangers on, and it runs very well at all speeds. So it's been a very good truck. They probably built I don't know, 30,000 of 40,000 of them.
Oh, wow.
A lot of them. So here's GP30. Then this is what the General Electric came out with their U25, and this is actually U28B, but it's the same similar unit, and they were pretty good. They'd worked on this, and they, prior to this, they'd been working with Alco. Alco would produce the unit and the car body and the motor, and then General Electric did all the electrics and the controls. But then GE decided they wanted to get into the business themselves, so they came out with a U25B. This is a U28B. Here's a U25C, which is basically U25 with it's 2,500 horsepower, 16 cylinder. Their FDL engine, and but it's on 6-axle trucks. So this was used out west in Wyoming, and also to haul coal from southern Illinois. So here's the U28C. They cranked the horsepower up a little bit, raised the RPMs, and that's 2,800 horsepower. And here's a 28. Is that oh, that's a 30. So they raised it some more. They just kept cranking the horsepower up. There's the GP35. It's 2,500 horsepower. They sold about 1,000 of these, so they did very well. There's probably still quite a few of these running around, especially on short lines. So here's some more GP35s. Here's the back end, and they called this the Spartan cab, and this was a very simple design, but it was quite attractive. Very simple, easy to make, and I don't know how many thousand they made, because everything from the GP35 all the way to the SD70 used the same cab and basically the same car body. So there's a GP40. Now in 1966, they bored out and increased the stroke on the 567 cubic inch engine. That's 567 cubic inches per cylinder.
Per cylinder.
Big engine. Wow. Yeah, they're serious engines. And they went to 645, and they called it the 645. And so this standard model of the 645 gave them turbocharged, gave them 3,000 horsepower. And they had to do that, of course, because General Electric came out with a U30B, 33,000 horsepower. And Burlington bought quite a few of these GP40s, as did Milwaukee and quite a number of the railroads. They sold over, well, I think 1,200 of these things, so total. And then here's the original SD40. This actually didn't sell that well initially. It was this is the plain SD40, 3,000 horsepower, but it had the old controls. And then General Electric, or General Motors, excuse me, redid the controls in 1972, and they came out with modular controls and everything, and that unit sold very well. They sold about 5,000 of them. So
Yeah, that was a runaway.
yeah, and in the 80s, if you were out watching trains, you probably saw SD40s. That was it. I mean, it was
Yeah.
so here's an SD24 here and a U25C. Both, this is 2,400 horsepower. This is 2,500 horsepower, both about close to 90,000 pounds of tractor effort. So here's 28B, GP40, SD24. I took this down at Dayton's Bluff, which was not actually the worst engine terminal, but Carl and I had special shoes in the trunk when we'd get to one of these, because if you walked around, you'd end up with this big mass of boiling mud on your shoe. The worst one was the Rock Island engine terminal down in Inver Grove, which is still a hazardous waste site.
Really?
Wow.
It was there were puddles of fuel oil sitting on the ground, so that's not a good thing. So yeah, those are before the days of, now they have pans and water control systems and everything under them. But so here's an plain SD40.
Plain SD40. Right.
A plain SD40. And in the late 60s, the Burlington was doing run-throughs. They were trying anything they could do to get through Chicago without spending 3-4 days, So this is probably number 82 coming down from they would pick it up at the Great Northern, and then they would run it all the way to Lima, Ohio, right around Chicago. And so they would have a Burlington engine, and then because that would take it to Chicago, they would get onto the Erie Lackawanna, and I think this is a GP35, and that's a U25B, or maybe a 28B, and they would run it all this way. They could run right on, change crews, and they go right on around Chicago. And you can see there's fruit in this piggyback trailer, so you want to keep that one moving. I guess it is a U25B. So that's a General Electric U25B and a GP35. Now here's one that was at Dayton's Bluff. This is actually, we ain't mad at nobody, because this is an Alco. Is that Craig? Is that a 424 or 425?
425.
425. So that's 2,500 horsepower, 4 axles. This is a General Electric 2,500 horsepower, 4 axles. This is a General Motors 2,500 horsepower, 4 axles. So like I say, we ain't mad at nobody.
Yep.
All in the same paint scheme too. Pretty good. And then Burlington, of course, had their very nice cabooses. These are international car, extended vision, so they could see around the train a little bit. Now in 1970, of course, they merged, and then you started seeing, this is a Great Northern blue car. This blue back here is the if you can kind of see that.
Yeah.
This was, I think you've all seen the Great Northern Big Sky blue,
Right.
and then the white stripe, and then a dark gray roof. That was their version of the Great Northern. Thought, well, we're going to make our own. This is going to be the merger scheme, and so that was the merger scheme that they came up with. And so then after the merger, there were all sorts of schemes. This is the old Great Northern scheme, old Burlington scheme, and then of course some of them they just painted silver with Burlington Northern on the sides. Then they put stripes in the nose.
Yeah.
That's in Seattle. Green and white stripes. I took this one up in Northtown. I think that's green and white also. Here's the old Great Northern passenger scheme, the Great Northern Freight. And as you can see, one of the problems with the blue is it looks terrible when you get a little bit of dust on it.
Yeah.
That's actually blue under there. Now the passenger cars have been washed, so they don't look so bad.
Yeah.
And then the Burlington came up with their own scheme. They came up with, they said, well, they were sort of kind of agreeing on this, what they called Cascade Green. The three railroads sort of said, yeah, that looks pretty good. And it doesn't look bad. These units are dirty, but it doesn't look too bad. The white, not so good. They did this, what they call the hockey stick, where they kind of goes along and then drops down. I think I got a bit, here's a picture of it. So this was what the Burlington proposed as the merger scheme.
Yeah. If you send me a electronic copy of that previous picture, I can take that crud out for you.
Oh, this, oh, okay, I'll do that. All
Yeah,
right.
I can get rid of that.
Yeah, it's something with slide processing. That was
Yeah.
a problem with slide processing. It's Kodachrome was great, but it had to be just right. And if the operator of the machine wasn't doing things quite properly.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, this is an SD45, a Burlington, and all ready for Burlington Northern. And this is the infamous hockey stick that they
Right.
came up with. But the white, as we say, white doesn't do that well. So
They built over 1,200 SD45s.
yeah, it was a very successful engine.
Yeah.
And it's a 20-cylinder locomotive, and it actually ran pretty well. It is an extremely reliable engine. About 98% of the nuclear plants in the United States and Canada and elsewhere have these diesels, 3,600 horsepower, 20-cylinder, and they are the emergency power for the plant. And they run them every month. Yeah, but they hit start and they start and run. And so I think General Motors probably sold as many stationary engines as they did in the locomotives. But it is still the standard. It is still the standard. They love those things. That's the story of the 645. Well, here's the back end of the California Zephyr. And that's it for Burlington.